now, the PowerPoint?
Yes, sir.
Okay, then that's wonderful. Right. So are there any more introductory remarks or anything that you would like to add to it, or should we wait a little more?
Sir, I think we have enough participants. We can officially begin with the webinar.
Okay, excellent. Excellent. So we begin formally in the name of God, 𝗦𝗍𝗏. And so before we go on towards the topic, let me introduce myself. Most of you are aware who I am. I am working as the head of the biochemistry department at present. I'm also holding the portfolio of the director, 𝗟𝗢𝒏, and I am also the secretary of EduLife. My educational background, I graduated from 𝗂𝒂𝒓𝒂𝒦 Medical College some 2 decades ago. And since then, I've been involved in clinical practice, in medical teaching, and in research. And over the years, I have done various academic degree programs and certificates and whatnot. So this is how the career of a doctor progresses. We have to be on our toes all the time. And this is how our life is. So having spent a good 15, 20 years in research and teaching, I have realized that there are certain, shortcuts. I wouldn't say they are shortcuts because you only learn those things with time, with a lot of effort. But then those are the things which you may not find in the literature, which are not listed as such as the recommended guidelines. But those are the things which are the way forward, keeping yourself in line with the recommended guidelines, and also, making and devising your own ways and means to come up with meaningful research out. So in that spirit, today's topic is going to be today we are going to talk about narrative reviews. Although the flyer says that it will be a comprehensive guide on narrative reviews, but I believe a webinar, it is beyond the scope of a webinar to have a comprehensive discussion on narrative reviews. And we can never be comprehensive enough. Research is such a thing that no matter how much you discuss, no matter how much you learn and teach, you can never comprehend the entire scope of it. So it will be more of a primer. We will talk about what narrative reviews are. We will talk about reviews in general, their major types, and then we will also talk about the benefits of narrative reviews themselves and what are the benefits to the researchers who are doing these narrative reviews. Obviously, all research tools that are available, they have their own pitfalls as well. And narrative review is not a very strong tool as such for research. It has its limitations, so we will also talk about those limitations, and then we will talk about how to overcome those limitations when you are doing your narrative reviews. We'll obviously talk about the steps that we need to follow to write a nice narrative review. And obviously within that step, there is a very important component, that is accessing research papers. So we will also touch upon how we can access good quality research papers for writing our narrative reviews. And then I'll also tell you how you can assess whether what you have written is good enough or not. So there are certain, scales that we can utilize to see where we stand. So that I will also introduce to you. One of the questions that was given to me by Umair was about artificial intelligence in narrative reviews. Now, artificial intelligence is a very up and coming field. And yes, it is making life a lot easier for us when it comes to searching the literature, when it comes to idea generation. And there are so many tools, there is SciSpace, there is Elicit, there is Litmaps, and then ChatGPT, Gemini, Bard, all those things are available. And if we use them nicely enough, I think we can save a lot of time, and we can be a lot more thorough than what we were previously. Having said that, jumping onto the bandwagon of artificial intelligence right away, it is not the right approach. I still feel that you have to have a basic on-ground understanding of what research is, what a narrative review is, how to do a narrative review if there was no artificial intelligence. If you know that, then incorporating artificial intelligence into that broad base, it will not be a problem at all. But if you go directly to artificial intelligence, I feel you will miss out on many important steps. So today I'm going to limit myself to how we do a narrative review, the traditional, okay? And perhaps in another setting, or perhaps in the second phase, when you have your mentors as well, then we can incorporate artificial intelligence into narrative reviews. Do you agree with this approach? Guys, can you listen to me?
Yes, well, basics should always come first.
Okay, good. Right. So what is a review? If you look at the dictionaries, you will find that a review is a noun or a verb, and it has two meanings. It is a formal assessment of something with the intention of bringing change if needed, or it is sometimes a critical appraisal, like a book review or a movie review, which is published in some magazine, in some newspaper. So that is the dictionary meaning of review. But in scientific terms, a review is a comprehensive evaluation of the literature. It is an analysis of the literature. And then based on that initial evaluation and analysis of the literature, it is a synthesis of all that, making a coherent, making a logical, sequential. That is what a review is. The benefits of why do we need a review? There is a lot of literature coming up every day. If you go back a couple of decades earlier, the amount of data that was there, the amount of research output that was there, there is no comparison with what it is now. It has just gone above, it has just blasted off into outer space. Too many papers coming up every day. So how do we read all those papers? We cannot do that. So the reviews, they come in handy. They basically provide an overview of the research findings that are coming up. Then they provide an overview of the methodologies that are used by those research projects. And then they give you insights which may be missed by individual papers, but when those collectively, those papers, they are looked under the term of a review, then you can have the insights, a collective insight. New trends can be highlighted by these reviews. New perspectives on old practices, they can be shared in reviews. And then reviews, obviously, they also give a summary of what is happening and what has happened. And then reviews, they are most important because they help you identify gaps in knowledge. If I am a researcher and I do a research paper, what I will try to do is that I will try to tell you that this is the final answer. But in research, there is no final answer. So how do we know whether somebody who is claiming that this research is the ultimate research is the right way or not? So that is where reviews come in handy. They identify gaps in those research. So they identify gaps in knowledge. And when you identify gaps in knowledge, then obviously those gaps are pointing you towards future research directions as well. So this is the advantage of having these review articles. One of the questions, again, shared by Umair was that, why are narrative reviews or reviews not as such encouraged by certain institutions? Well, from a scientific point of view, obviously, an original research, it carries a higher impact. So institutions are looking for original research. They're looking for creating impact because impact carries more weight when it comes to university rankings, in institutional rankings. Impact has more weightage. So they are not looking for productivity. They are more towards impact. But then, having said that, this is institutional practice. This varies from institution to institution. When I was in Pakistan, before going for my PhD, I also thought the same. I thought review articles are a waste of time because you don't get any credit. PMDC does not accept them. Perhaps HEC also does not give them the same weightage as an original research article. But when I went to England, in the first 6 months of my PhD training, my supervisor made me write review articles because he said that your thesis for your PhD, the initial part of that thesis will be entirely the very thorough and comprehensive literature review of the topic that you are addressing in your research. So I started writing literature reviews. And then when I got them published in good journals, I realized that the acclaim that comes with it, it is no less than original research. And it is that you just need to have those tools and you can start writing. For original research, you have to muster a team, you have to get funds, and you have to do all sorts of running around. On the other hand, a review article gives you this opportunity to stay at your desk and come up with very meaningful outcomes. So review articles are definitely worth attempting. What a review article gives you as such. A good review articles, it will provide you with a list of references which are up to date, references which you must know as a researcher. It will also talk about controversies, ongoing debates. It will talk about unanswered questions as well. So as a reader, a review article is definitely a research item that is your first solution. That is your first, I would say, it is your door to entering a research topic. So if you want to enter a domain, a research domain, the threshold that you need to cross, that threshold is provided by a good review article. Now about the types of review articles, there is this good old narrative review, which was previously called literature review as well, but now we call it narrative review. And then there are systematic reviews. Systematic reviews are an improvisation of narrative reviews. Narrative reviews, when it comes to the hierarchy of the evidence-based research, they are considered at the lower level. Systematic reviews, by adding a systematic approach, they take this narrative review from a lower level of evidence to the highest level of evidence. And that is smart play. So systematic reviews, as the name suggests, they have a flow. They have a certain system in place before you go about writing your review. And we will briefly touch upon that as well. And within systematic review, if you add statistical analysis, if you pool the data from the selected studies and do a collective statistical analysis of that pooled data, that gives you a meta-analysis. So meta-analysis these days, they are considered the highest level of evidence alongside the policy guidelines as well. So as we have discussed, narrative review is a qualitative summary of the literature. It focuses on synthesizing the evidence from previous research and to construct a coherent narrative. Coherence is very important. There has to be a flow in a narrative review. It has to be like a short story. It has to be like a novel, so that when the reader reads your review, they feel that they are drawn into reading it till the end. It has to have a structure. It has to have a flow. Narrative reviews, how they are good for early career researchers is that they are very flexible. Even if you don't have good training in research, they allow you to get into the act. And during this course of writing a narrative review, you learn so many things. You learn about original research, you learn about systematic reviews, you learn about methodologies, you learn about statistical analysis, you learn about how to present your results, and then you learn how to discuss, dissect, compare, and contrast various research findings. So there is a lot of flexibility that is provided by a narrative review. Then you can also always in a narrative review give your own personal interpretation. Sometimes in scientific field, our voice is muffled. Narrative reviews give you that voice. It is not muffled. you can say what your heart wants to say, based obviously on the literature that you are discussing. And you can include diverse sources in narrative reviews. Systematic reviews, on the other hand, they restrict you to either choosing original research or randomized controlled trials or perhaps other systematic reviews only. But in narrative reviews, it is up to the authors whether they want to include RCTs, whether they want to include cross-sectional studies, whether they want to include meta-analyses, or they want to include all of them altogether. So it is up to them. There is a lot of flexibility in inclusion of the sources as well. About systematic review, as I said, they have a very rigorous and systematic approach. It is like a funnel. So lots of data is coming in. And when I say data, I'm talking about research papers. And that data, then it is passed through a funnel. And that funnel has a sieve in it. It has a filter in it. And that filter is a predefined eligibility criteria for research. So when it passes through that sieve in the funnel, only a select few, a handful of studies, they come up. And it is on those handful of studies that you base your systematic review. So systematic review is more objective. Narrative review is primarily a very subjective, very flexible kind of review. Systematic review is very objective and it has a very carefully thought out assessment of the evidence. The advantage of a systematic review is that it eliminates bias. And good systematic reviews are the basis of your policy guidelines, clinical practice guidelines. Add to this systematic review approach statistical analysis by pooling data from various studies, and you get a meta-analysis. So meta-analysis basically, it tells you how strong an effect is. There are 10 randomized controlled trials on a drug. All of them are saying that this drug is good. Only one of them is saying that this drug does not have the desired effect. But the 9 which are saying this drug is effective, the 9 of them have different effect sizes. So how do we know which is the truth? We do a meta-analysis. And we do a meta-analysis, we pool the data, and then we calculate the effect size. That is the mean average of all the selected studies. And that tells you that increases the sample size, that increases the robustness, and that increases the applicability of the results to the general population. However, meta-analysis requires that the studies that you are using, they are homogeneous. That's very important. They are just the same, exactly the same. And in actual practice, it is very difficult to find studies which are identical. Identical in terms of the methods that have been used, in terms of the drugs that have been used, in terms of the RCT designs that have been used. So homogeneity is a very important aspect of meta-analysis, and that is where meta-analysis are limited, because you, in the end, do not get very homogeneous, very identical studies to do a purposeful meta-analysis. Are there any questions so far? Right. So I believe we need to move ahead. So this is precisely
Guys, I believe there may have been a technical error. सर इमरान की तरफ से we'll wait. He'll join again कुछ देर तक ही.
Sorry, I got disconnected. Let me just put up the PowerPoint again. Right. Okay. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. So you may move on, sir.
Right. Okay. Right. So narrative review, as we have discussed, it is a story. It has to be a narrative. It has to follow discourse. So there is a sequence of events. You can say it is the plot of the story, and that sequence has to be logical. It has to be arranged in a manner that is palatable for the readers, that is enjoyable to the readers. If a narrative review is, not structured, it does not have a flow, it will be a failure, no matter how much good information you are putting into a narrative review. So the sequence, the flow has to be there in a narrative review. Narrative reviews are very wide ranging. Typically, they have a broad base. Although you try to focus on a topic, but then the focus is not exclusive. It is inclusive focus, which means that you have a broad base so that a general reader can also get benefit from the narrative review. And then, unlike a systematic review, it is not as explicit when it comes to identifying the eligibility criteria. You can be flexible. It is your own choice. Yes, that choice must be informed by thoughtful, discussion between the team. But then again, there is a lot of flexibility when it comes to selection of the papers for a narrative review. And then the intention for a narrative review is to describe and synthesize the available literature. And then after you have described, after you have synthesized, you have to give a conclusion as well. Most of the times when I see student is missing, that is the problem. The conclusion is missing. And when the conclusion is missing, then obviously you have lost the point of doing a narrative review. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Yes, sir.
Right, okay. Right, good. So what makes us do literature reviews or narrative reviews? What is the logic behind that? If I tell you that in the 1990s, the amount of research that was today, I think you will feel that perhaps I'm exaggerating. But in fact, this is not an exaggeration. This is in fact far from the truth, because the amount of papers that are being published now are not just 100 times, they are thousands, perhaps 100,000 times more than what it was back in 1990s. So just 2-3 decades ago, things were so different from today. So do you have the time for reading so many research papers? Do I have the time for reading so much research papers? No, we don't. We can't. Nobody can humanly do that. So we need literature reviews. We need reviews which give us a very good qualitative summary of what is going on. So the need is ever increasing. And then nowadays, a lot of literature reviews are also being published. So students come to me and they say, sir, we have identified this particular topic. And when we look up on the internet, there are hundreds of literature reviews on that very topic. So that discourages them. But I always tell them that don't get discouraged. You carry on with it. You will always find a new angle. You will always find a new direction to follow in that review article. And secondly, those reviews articles may have been done 1 year, 2 years, 3 years ago. And since then, a lot of new research has also come about. So you can always talk about that new research in your review article. So that is why you have review articles, and then on those review articles, you can also add further more review articles. The need never disappears. So this we have already talked about. Yes, one of the questions was why narrative review? Why not a systematic review? A systematic review, you need a very trained team. Systematic review you cannot do right away. You have to have a proper training. In fact, there are institutions which are offering certificate courses, and good institutions, they do not allow you to undertake systematic reviews if you have not taken formal training in doing systematic reviews. So expertise is required. Number two, systematic reviews take a longer time. Narrative reviews you can do if you have a good team. You can do a narrative review within a week if you spend that much time. So it is timeliness. For RCTs to be conducted and then a systematic review to be conducted based on those RCTs, it may be a matter of years. But for a narrative review, you can right away give a narrative, and that narrative review can then inform research, new research directions, and also inform clinical practice as well. Steps of writing a narrative review. Well, there are no hard and fast steps for writing a narrative review. We can have a breakdown in terms of how to go about it, but from my experience, I can tell you that it is an ongoing process. The basic thing is that you start with an idea. You start with an idea, you start with the topic. Within that topic, you search for literatures, you read about them, you find research questions, you find research gaps, you start feeling, when you read, you start feeling that this is something that I can write about. This is something that has a nice flow and that has certain areas which still need exploration. And I can, conclude my review based on suggestions to follow those research directions. So we will talk about the key steps. There are 9 or 10 steps listed on this slide, so first we have to formulate a research question. Students come to me, they say, well, we'd want to do a narrative review. And how do we go about it? Give us a topic. It is not for me to give them a topic. It is for you as the principal authors, as the team which is going to lead the charge to come up with a topic. And how you come up with a topic? A near and dear one faced certain disease, and you feel that this is a disease that you can talk about. You go to the hospital, you go to the ward, you see an interesting case. That case is something that you feel you can learn more about. You start reading the literature, and then from within that literature, within that reading, you find your research questions. So you have to identify a topic. Then you have to give rationale and justification for that topic. The rationale justification, for example, if you talk about the risk of lung cancer caused by smoking. Now, this is on this topic. Yes, you can. Why? Although it is established, why? Because there is so much coming up, You can always come up with the rationale. You can always justify that since the last many years, the data on this topic has exploded. And now we are talking about lung cancer, smoking in terms of microRNAs, in terms of gene expression. So from those clinical studies of the late 80s and early 90s to the genetic studies of today, a lot has changed. So you can always find a rationale for even a very basic topic like smoking and lung cancer. Then you have to define your audience. That is very important. One, the topic should be close to your heart. Then second, the topic should be interesting to the audience. And then what will be the audience? The audience will be undergraduates. The scope of the review will change. The audience will be a general practitioner. The scope of this review will be very different. The audience will be clinical practitioners. The scope will be very different. The audience will be oncologists. It will be a totally different scope. And if the scope of the review. So your review is directed towards the audience. And I suggest at the level that students are to keep the audience broad, to keep your review suitable for a larger group of audience rather than focused on one particular audience. Also, when you are framing the research question, when you are giving the problem statement, or you can also say that it is a statement of purpose or statement of intent, you can always mention what new insights this particular review will add. The second step, after you have the topic, after you have the audience, and after you have this problem statement, somebody wants to ask a question. Magul and Fatma have raised their hand. Iman, Fatma.
Yes, sir. Sir, I was just about to ask that आपने audience की बात की, will a normal the normal layman or a person with no prior medical education, can they be put up as an audience for the narrative review, or is it just
Okay,
for
right.
medical?
Right. This is a very interesting question. Yes. So the answer to this is that narrative reviews are actually a research publication. And when you say it is a research publication, you are saying that it is for the consumption of people who know about that topic, who have prior knowledge of that topic. So if you are going to write a review, you can always write a review for the lay public, but that review will be a totally different review. It will not be a narrative review. It will be a magazine article. It can be a newspaper article. These days, when you go on, your internet, you can find so many websites that have very nice summaries about diseases, and some of them in fact are so good that even when I read them, I find that there is always a new angle there. So it is that kind of material that goes into the consumption of the lay public. But narrative reviews as such are in the research domain and are for an expert audience and not the lay audience. Is it clear?
Yes, sir, it's clear. Also, I wanted to ask that can we present an idea in a narrative review and then have it, it could be like uh, when we go to some, how we present a project and then we ask for fundings. Is it like a narrative review? Can it be considered as a like we can
Okay, I get it. I get where you're coming from. Well, yes, this is a very good practice. If you have published papers in a given research field, your chance of getting funding increases. So if you have a narrative review, you have already published that narrative review. That tells a lot about your interest in that field. And if you're going for a grant funding and a proposal related to that narrative review, you can always cite your own research. You can always tell that we have done this initial homework and we have published it. And then obviously when they are considering you for funding, it places you in a better position as compared to somebody who has not had that much exposure of publication and that particular field. So narrative reviews, definitely they give you an advantage when it comes to applying for grant funds.
Okay, thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Right. Okay, so once you have your problem statement, then you can start your literature search. Now, literature search, obviously the topic itself, the terms that you have written in your problem statement, you will start looking up those terms in the databases. And when you are looking up in the databases, make sure you are keeping a record of that. That's very important. Previously, when I started doing narrative reviews, we did not do that. But now journals, they ask for your search strategy. Even if it is a narrative review, they still ask for a search strategy. So please make sure when you are searching the literature, you are keeping a record of the databases that you are using. You're keeping a record of the keywords that you are using. Initially, you may not have a lot of search terms, but as you retrieve literature, you read through the literature, more and more search terms will become available and you will keep on searching them. So this becomes a very nice cycle. You have a very broad search initially, broad-based search, then you narrow it down, and then you narrow it down further, and finally you have the relevant literature. So it is basically searching for the literature, and at the same time, you are searching for the keywords for your review, which will actually form the part of the search for your relevant literature. Search strategy and search terms, as I told you, you have to keep a record of that. Because if you put in a paragraph in a narrative review that this is how we went about searching for the literature, these were the key terms, keywords that we used for our search, and this much amount of papers were retrieved initially, and this much were excluded based on whatever strategy you have devised. So it gives the editors, gives the reviewers an idea that you have done a very thorough and meticulous search of literature. And as I already told you, a wide range of methods can be used. Various databases can be used. Cross-sectional studies can be included. RCTs can be included. A mix of all those sort of studies can be included. So there is a lot of flexibility in searching for the literature when it comes to narrative reviews. When you have that literature, you have searched out the literature. Maybe there are around 500 papers that appear to be relevant based on your database search criteria. Now, this inclusion and exclusion criteria, it is not going to be as stringent, as objective as the systematic review. When I say inclusion and exclusion criteria, what I mean with reference to narrative reviews is that you can decide that I'm going to include only published original research papers. So I will not look up review articles. I will not take up editorials. I will not take up commentaries or any short correspondence. And I will not take up any preprint papers. It is up to you. So this is a narrative review which we are going to base on published original research. So that is a reasonable, a rational research strategy. So you can always specify that this is how we screened the papers. So you have to be very clear about it, and you have to also mention, in narrative reviews at the end, when you are giving author contributions, you can always tell that this particular author or these two authors were involved in the screening and sampling of the retrieved literature. Another important thing here is the quality of the papers that you will be citing in your narrative review. Now, this HEC, HGRS system, as you know, it has these X, Y, and Z and W categories. They are based on the standing of the journal. Right? So a Z journal and a W journal in a W journal is likely to be a stronger impact paper as compared to that published in a Z category journal. So when you are writing your review articles, make sure you also look at the quality of the papers that you are citing. If you are citing good papers, your narrative review, it will carry more weight. Because readers these days, they are very alert. And these days, your references come up with numbers. It will tell you which were impact factor journals, which were journals which did not have an impact, and which were perhaps predatory journals. So you will not want predatory journals to be cited in your review article. That is also an important part of screening and sampling. That is assessing the quality of the articles you are citing. Then comes the part of analysis reporting. So these narrative reviews, there is a term that we use when we are describing the analysis and reporting of narrative. It is that they are iterative and recursive. That is, you write, you analyze, you rewrite, you reanalyze, and the cycle keeps on going. So one thing I would advise you is that once you have retrieved literature and you are about to start selecting and screening and sampling the papers, it is at that time you start keeping notes. These days, you could write it down on your laptops and notebooks. In the old days, we had to write them by hand. Why I'm telling you this is that you have to use reference management softwares right away. Until and unless you have the memory of a genius like Einstein. Otherwise, because there are so many papers, there's so much information, you will forget where you read a particular information from. So it is always good to start writing. Just keep on writing. Of your narrative review, you write the important points and you note down the citation. So that is very important. Once you have a large body of those written up notes, you can always collate them, arrange them in a sequence, in a logical manner, and that will give you the first draft of your narrative review. So analysis and reporting, it has to go side by side with your screening, sampling, and literature search. This is important. Now, within analysis and reporting, there is a descriptive element in narrative reviews. You just describe what happens. And then there is an interpretive element. So this is very important. When I see students writing narrative reviews, most of the times there is descriptive element and there is no interpretive element. And a narrative review without interpretive element is not a good review. Interpretive element is that you have to give your point of view. That is important. That is why it is different from a review article which is published in a magazine. In a magazine, you have to just describe. In a health journal, which is for the lay public, you just have to describe. But here in a narrative review, you are also adding your own academic input, your own interpretation. That is very important. So make sure that when you write descriptive as well as interpretive analysis and reporting for a narrative review. Now, about the limitations. As we have seen, when there is flexibility, then there are problems with reproducibility. Because if I do a narrative review, and if Mr. X, Y, or Z, they do a narrative review, because of the flexibility that is there, the output that comes out will be very different. All four will be 4 different narrative reviews. They will not be the same. So reproducibility is a problem with narrative reviews. And that is perhaps one of the most common criticism of narrative reviews. Secondly, narrative reviews, because the search, it is also flexible. So the search is not entirely exhaustive. You use your own databases, you select databases, you only stick to those databases. So it is not exhaustive. You may miss very important papers because of the flexibility that it offers. So there is always this element of missing out important things or overstating unnecessary things. That is also a problem with narrative reviews. And then when a narrative review is there, how do you critically apprise that narrative reviews? You cannot. A critical review of a narrative review is not possible because of the inherent flexibility in that narrative review. So how do we overcome that? This looks bad, yes, but there are ways in which we can minimize this from looking that bad. We can be thoughtful right from the beginning. We can be very clear. We can be purposive. Audience is there. Topic is defined. We are very transparent. We are not keeping any secrets. We are telling what were the databases used, what were the search terms used, what were the criteria on which we excluded articles, how we sampled the articles. So everything is very explicit. Then you have to be a little cautious as well. When we are concluding, we make big, tall claims. We have to avoid that. There are no tall claims to be made following a narrative review. It is always giving directions. Narrative review is not for giving judgments. It is you only give possible solutions. So if you do this, I think your narrative review will be good enough. Good enough comparable to any good narrative review otherwise. So these are some basic points that you can follow. And if you follow these points, your narrative review will take a very nice shape. So searching the data, it is very important. There are a few questions and I would like you to just have a look at them. So how do we access the published research papers? So we use a freely available academic database such as Google Scholar. Do you think it is the right answer?
No.
Well, I would say yes, it is. We can use Google Scholar. Why not? We can use it. Yes, it may not be the only search engine, but it is one of the very important ones. So we could use it. It is freely available. It is for us to use. We use it. Can speak to the institutional librarian to learn about institutional access to journals. HEC has a digital library. We can make use of these repositories. We can talk to them. We can access published research papers through that as well. We should also know that some papers we can get PDFs very easily right away. But then there are others which can ask you to pay certain amount, subscription charges. So that is also a consideration. Do we want to miss out on those papers in which we have to pay? Or do we pay? What do? We ignore them or we pay them?
We mostly ignore them.
Right. So this is what we do. Yes, you are right. But this is not the right approach, because then the purpose of the narrative review will be lost. Any paper that comes in your selection, in your search, that comes out in your search, that has the potential to go into your narrative review. So you cannot ignore such papers. You have to find means and ways to get hold of those papers. Right. So paywall, yes, this is what we do ignore them, but we should not be ignoring them. We should be finding out ways to get hold of those papers. Right. So databases, Google Scholar, yes. First and foremost, we go to Google Scholar. Most popular, wide range of journals, all academic fields, very simple, just like Google, write in a word, and it gives you thousands and thousands and thousands of results. Very powerful. Disadvantage, all academic fields, merging of fields. Sometimes the citations, they are not very clear. Then another problem is all sorts of publications are there. Peer-reviewed, non-peer-reviewed, anything that is there on the internet in terms of a scholarly practice, it is there on Google Scholar. So how do we know whether it is a good quality paper or not? That is the problem with Google Scholar. Then we go on to PubMed from a medical point of view. PubMed, high quality journals in health and life sciences. And it's the first line of resource for anyone who is doing medical research. So PubMed is excellent, but PubMed is narrow. Nowadays, it is not just medical science. It is medical science linked with engineering. It is medical science linked with computers. It is medical science linked with physics. So we are always on the edge or the crossroads of medical science with other disciplines. So PubMed sometimes restricts us to only medical and health sciences journals. So we need sometimes to go beyond that. For that, there are other very good databases. One is Lens, then there is Dimensions, and obviously the paid databases like Scopus and Web of Science are also there. They also broaden the scope of your search. So for published papers, I recommend that you use these important databases. As a starting point, rather than jumping onto original research, you can always dig up a good review article in that field. What it will do, it will summarize the current state. It will give you solid references that you can look up, and it will already have identified certain research gaps. So a good review article is a good search, is a good start for doing your literature search, whether it is for an original research article or for a narrative review. And as I told you, so review articles can be of different types. And in those on top of this pyramid, this is the pyramid of the levels of scientific evidence. So the topmost is your clinical practice guidelines, and right underneath them are your systematic reviews and meta-analysis. Narrative reviews, they are almost at the bottom, just above the animal. So I'm not saying this is a pyramid of scientific evidence. On the top means it is less, yes, but it defines policies. At the bottom means that it is adding to the knowledge, it is large, broad-based, and it is what is leading to the topmost practice guidelines. So narrative reviews are the foundations. You have to have the foundations for the building to stand tall. So full text papers, yes, open access, we can get them. Authenticated users, sometimes we have sign-in options, we get them. But then, and at other times, sometimes authors also upload their papers, author archived copies, like on ResearchGate, they can have those papers. So you can get access of full text papers from them. But then sometimes you are stuck. There are paywalls. You are required to make a payment. You don't have the money. How do you go about it? What do you do about it? There are options. Fortunately for us, there are options. You can speak to the librarian. You can write to the corresponding author. And then you can use AI tools which are available these days. One such very interesting tool is 𝗏𝗡𝗏. 𝗏𝗏 is a small browser extension. You can go to 𝗏𝗏𝗏.com and you can download the extension. And any paper, anywhere it has a PDF, anywhere on the web, 𝗏𝗏𝗏 will find it for you. And it will give you the PDF for that. So it makes life very easy sometimes to have this browser extension installed. Writing to corresponding author. This is I get requests. I get requests about my papers from various people. And interestingly, all my papers, with the exception of hardly maybe 3 or 4, I have published more than 100 papers now. With the exception of 3 or 4, all of them are open access or they are available on the internet. But still I get requests for that. So that I never respond to that because I don't have the time to respond to all those requests. And similarly, people will not respond to your requests if their articles are already there on the internet. So make sure that this particular article that you are looking for is not available in the full text form. Make sure of it. Your institution does not have access. It is not available on the internet. You have tried all the sources. Then you write politely, you introduce yourself, you introduce why you are interested in that particular paper. And then you can always tell that, give me a copy that may not be available made available by the journal, but you can give me a pre-published version. Give me a pre-published version, or because sometimes journals have copyrights, so they don't allow authors to even give you that. But the authors, if you convince them, if you write a nice, polite, gentle email, they will give you sometimes what is a pre-publication version, and that is good enough. So you can always use that for your information, and you can give citation of the published article. Right. So is this okay so far? This is just to give you a feeler about how to go about getting the research papers. Any questions?
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
Sir, I wanted to just ask that now that you're saying that we have to correspond to the author, how will we know that if his articles are not on the internet or anywhere else, how are we supposed to know that certain XY person is writing an article and we should be a part of that said so article?
No, so the first part of your question, I understand that, how do you know if the full text version is not available? And only then you have to write to the corresponding author. So you have checked all the databases. The full text is not there. Everybody, all those databases, they are asking for your either sign-in credentials or asking for payment. Number two, you have used unpaywall, you have used AI tools, and still the answer is a no. And then number three, your institution, HEC, does not have it on the digital library. So you can always write that my institution does not have, my national library does not have it, and I don't have the money to pay for the article subscription charges. So that is the reasonable enough justification for you asking for a full text. And the second part of your question, please.
I was just saying that if we know that, how are we supposed, if we don't know what that full text is, how are we supposed to know that even if we are interested in that subject or not? If we, how are we?
Obviously, the title and the abstract. Here we are talking about you searching. Your search word is diabetes and neuropathy. So all the articles that come in that search, which have diabetes and neuropathy in them, in the title or in the abstract, they are the articles that you are interested in. Okay? So you would want to read those full texts. You will not ignore the full text. You will not ignore the papers which do not have the full text. So you would want to get hold of all those papers. And from within those papers, when you have the full text, you will do the screening and the sampling. Otherwise, you cannot do that. Otherwise, your narrative review will be inadequate. You get my point?
Okay. Or, sir, one more thing. How are we supposed to know if a certain XY person is writing on the same subject as me, and I would like to collaborate with the other person, but I wouldn't know that the other person is writing? How are we
Right.
supposed to know about that?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. This is a good question. The question is, why would somebody want you to have a say in their work? They have a team, they're working on it. Why would they want it? In fact, in research, there is a lot of, secrecy involved as well. Sometimes it has so happened that in fact, not so many years ago, groups working on something and they kept it secret and both published almost around the same time. And it was a very, seminal discovery. And they both claimed, when it was about the Nobel Prize to be awarded, both of the groups were claiming that it is our discovery. And then they had to give a joint Nobel Prize because they had kept it a secret, working independently of each other. So I think collaborating on an already going research project, it is never a good idea. When you have to start a collaboration, you start right from the beginning. You are part of the process right from the beginning.
Okay, sir.
Right. Okay, moving ahead then. So quickly, now 10 tips. These are my tips for you to go about writing a narrative review. First is defining a topic and audience. Topic that is close to your heart. You are interested in the topic. If you are not interested in the topic, the audience, the readers will never be interested in the topic. Then defining the audience. I would suggest starting off, you should have a broader audience. Do not restrict yourself to an expert group. Keep a broader audience for your narrative review. Search and research the literature. This is the cornerstone of writing a good narrative review. Exhaustive, extensive search of the literature, it is required. Take notes while reading. As I told you, this will help you make up the first draft of your narrative review. And then choose the type of review you wish to write. These days, journals give you the options to write a mini review at times. A mini review is something where the journal restricts you in terms of the words that you can use and in terms of the references that you can use. So this restriction sometimes is a handicap. But at times, I feel that the restriction helps you focus on the key points. So it depends. If you are writing a full review, then you can go on in various directions. But if you're writing a mini review, it will always be a very focused review. So you can always choose the type of review, whether it's a mini review, whether it is a full review, want to go for a more critical review, or you want to go for more of a descriptive review with less critical element. So it is up to you. Once you have the literature, once you have the papers, then you can decide what kind of review you want to go for. As I said, the review has to have a focus, but early stages, you make it of a broad interest. In the end, your review is only as good as the number of readers it has. If you make a publication and nobody reads it, I don't think that it serves the point of doing that publication. So keep it of broad interest. Then you have to be critical when it comes to the papers that you are citing. You have to critically look at those papers. It is not just, as I said, interpretation is very important. Do not describe that Mr. Yang et al. Gave this finding in this particular randomized controlled trial. When they gave this finding, what are the implications? What are the drawbacks? What are the pitfalls in the study? That you can always make part of your narrative review. So you have to be critical. When I say consistent, then consistency in terms of the language that you are using. I have seen, narrative reviews, which in fact have been published, that in some parts they're using active voice, in other parts they're using passive voice, in some parts their tense is present, and in others it is past. So that lacks consistency, that lacks the flow, and that is a bad narrative review. So in terms of language and grammar, you have to follow a consistent pattern. A logical structure, I cannot emphasize this any further. You have to make a story. You have to make a story that sells. You have to make a nice introduction. You have to make a middle part that keeps the readers engrossed and engaged. And then you have to give a concluding part, which is also equally interesting. So a logical structure is very important for a narrative review. Feedback is extremely important. We run away from feedback. As a nation, we don't like criticism. We want to be praised. If somebody says that you are doing something wrong, we take offense. This is wrong. In research, whether it is original research, whether it is narrative review, always be open to feedback. So feedback you can get at the stage when you are writing a narrative review. So you can ask your colleagues, you can ask your seniors, they will come up with some suggestions. And then once you have submitted it to the journal, narrative reviews will also undergo peer review. And your peer reviewers, they will give you feedback. Based on that feedback, you have to revisit the narrative review, you have to reshape it. And many a times it has happened with me that after peer review comments, and I have incorporated those comments, my narrative review has become much more solid looking as compared to when it was when I finalized it and submitted it for publication. So incorporation of feedback is extremely important.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes, please.
So there's a question in the chat box that how many authors should be present in the local research and how to get it published in PubMed. And can you also talk about regarding the 6 author criteria and PMDC criteria regarding that? And also specify this topic in this area regarding narrative review as well.
Right. Okay. So about the number of authors, there is no limit. If you have a narrative review which is on the cutting edge of the latest research, and obviously you would want all the experts to be part of the team. And those experts, the number can be 2, the number can be 20, doesn't matter. As long as there is justification of having a big team, you can have as many authors as you want on a team. And same is true for an original research. There is no restriction. The kind of research we do, generally, we don't need a larger team for that. At the undergraduate level, you are doing certain research, then 4 or 5 students and 1 supervisor. This makes sense. Anything bigger than that, because the scope of the research itself is very small, so you don't want a larger team. About the PM and DC criteria, I don't know the updated criteria, but I feel the first author, the second author, fourth, fifth, and sixth author, they get some credit. But again, this varies. This is institutional. This is what I would say, bureaucracy. This has nothing to do with research. A last author on the list is equally good for me as the first author. So when you are deciding the author list, when you are deciding the number of authors and the number on the list for each author, you are talking about in terms of their contribution to the paper. So yes, obviously, first author, we know when we look at a paper that the first author has contributed the most. The last author at times can be the supervisor. So maybe the supervisor has also contributed perhaps intellectually in a very big way. So that also gets credit. And then in between are the authors who have contributed to various aspects of the research, without which the research would not have been possible. So I think these bureaucratic elements, they should not deter you from doing research. Whether you are at first position, second position, or third position, I would suggest that you go and involve yourself in research, irrespective of what author position you are getting in terms of the author affiliations.
All right,
Right.
sir.
And
Thank you.
Vishal, you had another question?
Yes, there's another question that how narrative reviews help out in interventional research programs.
I honestly don't get this question. Interventional research programs. What is that? As far as I understand, I feel this is what you are saying, that, if some team wants to do a randomized controlled trial, that is an interventional research design. So if somebody wants to do a randomized controlled trial, would doing a narrative review before doing the RCT help? Is that the
Yes, in that
question?
sense, sir. Yes, sir, in that sense.
Right. So, yeah, of course, narrative review, it is your chance to get a publication. For an RCT, for an original research, you have to do literature review anyway. You have to do literature review anyway for all sorts of research papers. So whether it's original research, whatever it is. So this is an added chance that whatever review, following the tips that we have discussed today, and you can come up with the publication which go on your CV, which can be a PubMed publication, which can be an HEC publication, which can be a Web of Science publication. So it is credit on your CV. Yes, Nurul.
All right, sir. Thank you.
Sir, I have a question. Is it necessary to have any?
Has a question.
Sir, am I audible?
Yes, no,
Yes, please go ahead.
You can go on with
Okay.
your
Sir, basically, I have two questions. Is it necessary to have a supervisor for a narrative review? If yes, then how can we find one? And the second one is how long does it take to write a narrative review?
This is a good question. Well, for a narrative review, it is not necessary to have a supervisor. If I write a narrative review, nowadays I don't usually go about writing narrative reviews myself. But there was a time 5-6 years ago when I wrote a spate of 6-7 narrative reviews on my own, just single author papers on my own. So I did those narrative reviews. I did not require a supervisor because I felt comfortable and confident in my ability to write a good narrative review. Over the years, I had mustered enough knowledge and enough skill to do a narrative review. So feel confident enough, you can do it yourself. You can do it as a lone warrior. The second question, how to go about finding a supervisor? Well, you go talk to people who you think will be helpful. And if they agree, you can draft them into the team. And then you take them along, you get the best out of them, you give them a best output. And I think everybody who is in a position to contribute, because knowledge is about sharing. So anyone who has some knowledge and skills will be very happy to contribute if you approach them asking for their supervisory help.
Thank you so much. I get it.
You're welcome. Right. So moving on, the last tip. Yes, the number 9th tip. It is very important because usually narrative reviews, people who have spent their lifetime in one particular area, they write narrative reviews on that area. So naturally, they have published original research in that area. And when they are writing narrative reviews, they tend to use their own research, in that narrative review. But you have to be very objective. These days, these AI search engines and, these tools, they can search self-citation. And self-citation, if it is over and above a certain percentage, it is not considered good. It is considered bad practice. So you have to be objective. You can include your own research. You can always comment on that. And you can always highlight the pitfalls in that as well. If you do that, then you are writing a good narrative review, whether it is your own research included or not included. And then you have to be up to date. Very interesting thing is that when you are writing a narrative review, if you take a long time and you did your research, the literature search about 6 months ago, within those 6 months, new articles have come up. So narrative review is something that you have to be very timely about. Going back to the question by 𝗏𝗏𝗏, that how much time is required to write a narrative review. So narrative reviews ideally should be written quickly because you don't want more data to be coming in before you actually go about publishing your narrative review. Publication itself takes time. So you can write a good narrative review if you have a good team, you dedicate your time. With AI tools that are available, between 3 days to 7 days, you can come up with a good narrative review. You can always come up with a good narrative review in this short span of time. But again, it varies. It depends upon the dedication, the time spent, and the expertise of the team that is available to you. Right. So there is this scale that I wanted to tell you about. It is the scale for the assessment of narrative review articles. It is a very small scale. It has only 6 items. And within each item, there are 3 or 4 questions each. And you have to mark them, 0, 1, and 2. The total marks for this are 12. When you are assessing your own paper, you have to aim to be around 7, 8, 9. If your paper is less than that, if it is 6, if it is a 5, that means it needs to be polished more. So you can use this tool. This is a tool which is still in development. Modifications are coming up every now and then, but this is a useful tool. I find it a very useful tool because if you have it, when you are writing, you can write based on these things. You can use these tips to add points to your narrative review. In the end, I would want that now all of you who have participated in this webinar, that you should go about searching for a topic and starting on a literature review. All of you. Go about it. Because if you don't do it, you will never learn. Research is by doing. You can attend thousands of webinars, and if you don't do a single research project, you will never learn research. You do it, you learn. You don't do it, you will never learn. So do it today and find a mentor. And I'm very glad that IFMSA and SRC have this wonderful plan of starting a mentor-based narrative review activity in the second phase of this. And I will be very happy to supervise some of you if you are interested. And I think we can have some narrative reviews coming up very soon from all of you. So thank you very much. And if there are any questions or comments or feedback, you can always tell me now, or you can get back to me on my email. You also have my phone numbers. You can get in touch with me there as well. And I believe that's it.
Is the scale in the sir, is the scale available in the slides? Because the slides aren't moving.
Okay, so going back to the scale.
Yes, sir. Is the scale in the slides?
Yeah, I have a screenshot of the scale. It's SANRA, S-A-N-R-A. I don't know why these, let me just put on the slideshow again. Are the slides available, visible now?
Yes, sir, it's visible.
Let me just take you to that page. Okay. Yeah, this is the scale. Okay, Umair?
Yes, sir.
Right.
Is there any questions the participants have, if they would like to ask any questions? The floor is open for questions.
Right. So I think there are no questions.
Sir, we'd like to take a picture. If you can turn off your screen sharing, and every other participant can turn on their cameras, so that we can take a picture.
Yeah. Let me see. Just stop. Is it done?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Do we say cheese or we just take a picture?
So we can do it either way.
Are we done, Umair?
Sir, people are turning on their cameras, so I think we should wait for a few seconds.
There's this question, where can you read my research articles? You can go to ResearchGate, search my name, 𝗍𝗓𝒻 Shah, and you will get a whole list of my research articles. They're also on PubMed, and they're also on Google Scholar. They are also on my LinkedIn profile. They're also on 𝗟-𝗢, and they're everywhere.
So everyone get ready. We'll take a picture in 3, 2, and 1. I think, sir, that'll be it. And thank you so much for your time, and thank you for the participant for participating in this activity.
Thank you. My utmost pleasure. Wonderful, wonderful always interacting with you guys.
Thank you, sir.
So thank you everyone. If anyone of you had any query, you can send in our WhatsApp groups and we can forward it to Sir Imran. सही है सर, अगर हो सके किसी भी query हो अगर बाद में